Good morning, world. This is Steve Rao, the host of World Edition on P.O.D TV and also Roku TV. I greet you live today from the All-America city of Morrisville, in the 8th largest state in the United States. We are in the Research Triangle Park, and on this show, we welcome you to talk about global affairs, innovation, and what we're doing to navigate through a war in Ukraine, rising gas prices, inflation, new variants of the pandemic, and an attempt to return to a new normal. Today, my monologue is based on a game-changing, landmark transformation of abortion law in the United States of America. Yesterday, in a brief that was leaked by Politico, the Supreme Court, it appears, has decided to overturn Roe v. Wade and allow states to outlaw abortion. The authenticity of the draft has not been confirmed by other publications, but most legal observers are assuming that this is where we are headed. The tone and style of the draft match those of earlier court decisions, and it certainly seems that a storm is about to be unleashed upon the U.S. at a very critical time during the elections, the primary elections. If the court overturns Roe, let me be very clear. All conservative states, red states, will outlaw abortions. There should probably be North Carolina on the list if the Republicans retain majority of the Senate and House. Every Republican appointee on the court, other than Chief Justice Roberts, voted to overturn Roe. He wanted a compromise that abortions would be banned after 15 weeks, but that was not a very large amount of abortions. But Amy Coney Barrett, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Clarence Thomas all voted in favor, with the 3 Democratic appointees dissenting. The biggest caveat is this: the justices sometimes change their minds, so we don't know. But let's assume that they don't. As I close my monologue, I want to reiterate what Justice Alito, who wrote the majority opinion, said. He said, "We hold that Roe and Casey must be overruled. It is time to heed the Constitution and return the issue of abortion to the people's elected representatives." In his opinion, he says that the Constitution is silent about abortion and that nothing in its text or structure supports a right to abortion. Roe is so egregiously wrong, Alito argues, that it does not deserve to be retained as a precedent. Now, how did we get here? Well, first of all, it's interesting that when President Obama had 1 year left on his presidency, Mitch McConnell, the majority leader of the Senate, and others refused to allow him to appoint a justice. And secondly, the Supreme Court justices have three have been appointed by Trump, and all those are in line with this decision. I could go on, but the bottom line is this. The Republicans have been working on this for a very, very long time. Their vision, the conservative vision of no federal right to an abortion, is now very clear within their finish line of the conservative movement. It's taken years of conservatives and conservative presidents to get to the court to this level. But at the end of the day, we know that this could be a litmus test for the next election. We don't know whether this will motivate Democrats to turn out even higher numbers when Republicans were looking like they were going to overperform Democrats in these elections. Only time will tell. But as a political analyst and a citizen of this country, I actually think that this is a very, very tough issue, the right to life versus the right to choice. But I disagree with Justice Alito. I think freedom and liberty are about our individual choices. I'm not in favor of abortion. I have 2 lovely children. But I think in certain instances, it's the woman's right to choose. That's a debate we can argue for a very, very long time. But should the government be the ones making those decisions? That's the question at hand. Well, let the games begin. A very landmark decision, indeed. With us today, we have Mark Lee, Shaquille Latimer from Down Under, Chris,
We'll see if Shaquille pops in.
Chris
Oh, there we go
Greco.
with Shaquille. We do have Chris Greco as well. And of course, we've got Sasha Starr also here with us as
And
well. So we got the whole panel.
as a political analyst, as a disclaimer, I just want to say that I don't want this to be a debate about abortion versus pro-choice. I, as a politician, actually don't talk about this issue very much, but I do think it's important to look at the legal precedent that's being set here, guys. This is a huge, huge decision that could very well impact the next 30, 40, 50 years of the country. And quite frankly, it came as quite a surprise. I don't think a lot of us saw this coming. So I think, what are your thoughts about this decision? Do you know, I mean, please be candor, be frank with your opinions, be civil and just, but, you know, is it good for the states to decide this? And do you think this is going to affect the midterm elections now because Democrats are going to have more of a motivation to come out? I'll start with you, Shaquille Latimer. I must be very courageous today. I'm already starting to sweat.
Well, first of all, I'm not sure how this is even a left-right issue. It's like a lot of other issues that the Democrats try to sort of hijack and make it like it's their issue. You know, like Democrats are like, oh, we represent black people and you know, everybody who's not a Democrat is racist, as if there's all these Republicans that just hate black people. You know, as if that there's no Republicans that believe that it should be the decision about whether, you know, when life starts should be the domain of the woman and her family and her medical practitioner. There's no Republicans that view it that way. It seems like a really bizarre sort of way the Democrats try to frame this, especially considering that it was Republicans that supported the abortion rules prior to Roe v. Wade and prior to the evangelical Christians en masse joining the Republicans. So I just find it a kind of bizarre position for the Democrats to have. But look, first of all, we don't know that this is going to be the decision. It's a purportedly leaked document. Pretty rare that you see a leaked decision from the Supreme Court. The United States is pretty bad at keeping secrets, as I'm sure Chris Greco will say. There's not very much classified information that people don't already know. So, you know, the US government's really bad at keeping secrets, but the Supreme Court, they tend to keep these things under wraps. So I'm not 100% sure about the validity of this. I'm not sure whether, I haven't read the whole thing. A lot of it sounds like Alito's writing, but I'm not an absolute Supreme Court expert. But what I will say is, from a legal perspective, it sounds like this is hinging on the 10th Amendment. And if the Constitution of the United States does not specifically allow the federal government to make these rules, they're not saying that abortion should or shouldn't be legal. What they're saying is that it's not actually the jurisdiction of the federal government. It's a right, or it's a decision to be made by the states. And so I'm not sure that that's going to have a huge effect on the midterms. And lastly, I'll just say, no, I'll leave it at that for the moment. That's all right.
Okay, well, I like your analysis, Shaquille. Chris Greco, what are your thoughts on this before we go to Sasha Starr? Sasha, we apologize to bore you for an issue on U.S. Politics, but Chris, what are your thoughts?
So I was in intelligence for 20 years or so, well, more than that. This might be a what they call white intelligence. Somebody leaked this. It doesn't, and this is where we are immediately going to Samuel Alito wrote a decision, and this is a decision, and blah, blah, blah. And oh my God, we got to go out. We got to protest, blah, 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 blah. It goes crazy. We don't even know the validity. We have to get this corroborated. It's a leaked document, leaked to somebody in the press, leaked to somebody that went out there. I think if you go back to Roe v. Wade, take a look at the justices that made a decision on Roe v. Wade. There were 9 justices at that time. 7 voted for Roe v. Wade. 5 of those 7 were appointed by Republican presidents. So if you sit back and you say, hey, Republicans this and Republicans that, I understand that. I get it. But there are Democrat pro-life people that are for this. The problem is They don't want to come out and say it, because if they come out and say it, they're going to be vilified in every media outlet you can think of. So they just keep their mouth shut. And that's what happens. So the bottom line of this whole thing is this. Am I pro-choice? I believe that a woman has a right to choose whether or not she wants to keep the baby. Now, a man can sit there and say, well, I got a choice too. It's not your body, dude. You can have a choice. You can
Not
have
hers either, Chris. Chris,
right.
it's not her body either. It's not her. The body inside hers is not her body either. So if we're going to get into a debate about abortion,
and I don't want to do that. I'm just trying to, in my opinion. How about this, Shaquille? In my opinion, this is what it is. Because I have two daughters. And basically they're both kind of, hey, this is. I said, look, I get it. The consequences of having an abortion, the physical, the mental consequences, the spiritual consequences of having an abortion are huge. And what we need to do as people that are human and that are Christian or whatever religion we are, we sit back and we go, we need to help these women that have had abortions to understand and reconcile the situation with themselves. I think that's very, very, very important to do that. We can't just discount them. We can't just say they're sinners. They're going to go to hell. This is the way the situation is. Look, they made a decision, whether it was, right or wrong, in the eyes of Christians, the eyes of me, whatever else, we need to help them through
if Christians believe that having an abortion is akin to murder, then why wouldn't you expect Christians to sort of treat women who have had abortions for non-medical reasons that way? I mean, that's how Christians are.
Sure. Shaquille, I agree. I agree with you that some Christians or most Christians do feel that way. But I'm saying you forgive. You forget. You help those people to forgive and move on. You help those people to move on, to make better decisions, to make other decisions, whatever it is. Just because they made one bad one, doesn't mean they're going to make bad ones the rest of their life.
You don't suggest to murder victims' families that they should forgive the perpetrator of that murder, and that is the extreme conservative view.
Absolutely, they must forgive. I'll tell you why. It's not the Christian aspect or anything else. It's a psychological aspect. When you don't forgive that, then it's a problem.
Sasha, what is your perspective? We're going to get to Ukraine in a minute, but we're going to be coming back. We're going to be talking about this over the next few weeks. It's going to be a moving thing. But what is your perspective on this before we go to Mark Lee?
I think that government should stay away from abortion issue at all. Period. It's a question between pregnant woman, her family, her husband or boyfriend or whatever who is involved. And that's it. There is no governmental body have right to say one way or another what to do, how to do, when to do, if to do it. And they can keep their opinions to themselves and their families, but not to impose their views on the large population of the United States. And especially, it will lead to illegal abortions. So a lot of women will suffer because of that. Because if you determine to have an abortion, you will find a way to do it. The responsibility to bring up the child is enormous. You need millions of dollars to have available to properly bring up the child, to educate, to
I don't think you need millions.
Schools. Yeah, absolutely. At least anywhere from 1 million to several. Depends what education you want to give to them, whether you want to give them all private lessons in music and ballet and whatever else you want to do with them. It costs enormous amounts of money, time, determination. And not everyone is fit, in fact, to do that, even if has access to millions of dollars. But a lot of people simply don't have access. They simply cannot afford to have children. So
they should use birth control. They should use birth control.
I agree.
I agree. Yeah, everyone.
I have no problem with birth control, except that, as you know, it's not 100% provable. They don't. Birth control is not 100%.
So you take someone's life. The government says it's okay. I mean, this is the thing, right, about abortion rules. And I'm not going to tell you, like previous shows, I'm not going to say where I stand on whether I'm for it or against it. But I'll just say, both sides of this argument in the United States have pushed it to such extremes that things just completely lose context, right? So abortion is legal in most Western countries around the world. The US and the people on the left, politically in the US, act as though any kind of change to abortion rules is going to, bring the US back into the dark ages where women are using coat hangers and things like that. What I'd like to leave out of that is that comparative to the abortion rules across all of Europe, across Canada, Australia, New Zealand, etc., the United States has the most permissive abortion rules in the Western world. And then in some particular states where it's not available as easily, there's not a lot of clinics available, they have some of the most restrictive rules. So any kind of attempt to bring the US into line with international norms, you get this heated response from the political left of the US that claims that Republicans are just trying to annihilate women's healthcare choices and annihilate women's rights to choose. And you have the political right in the country, whenever there is some sort of expansion or some sort of clarification of rules on the political left, the political right of the United States acts as though that there's all these people in America that just want to kill these unborn people. And the truth of the matter is, and the reality of the situation is completely different to what's being described by the media. One thing I just want to very quickly say about this so-called decision that Politico have released, unless I've missed it, is there actually a case in front of the Supreme Court at the moment that brings Roe v. Wade into question?
Yes,
Because
Mississippi.
Yeah, several.
Yeah, there are. Mississippi, there's a case in Mississippi for restrictive abortion rights, and it is being on that. And
is that what this is supposed to be a response to?
Yeah, well, yes. Basically, what they're going to do is, and they can do this. The courts can do this. They can actually bring in a local case and then generalize it. A perfect case is Plessy versus Ferguson, Brown versus Board of Education. That was a complete overturn. Brown versus Board of Education was a complete overturn of Plessy versus Ferguson in the 1890s because they generalized that whole thing and were able to overturn that.
I'm going to end the debate this way. We could spend a whole hour on this. We could spend longer on it. Mark, what are your thoughts about this?
Well, one, I was thank you, Shaquille. One, I was surprised at this, but I also know that it is a political season, so I'm not going to be surprised if this was not an attempt by some on the political sides to muddy the waters, as Shaquille just said, and everything.
But does it help Democrats? Does it help Democrats? Because now it's giving them a reason to come out in greater numbers.
Well, I mean, it may get some to come out in greater numbers. I mean, let's be clear. And Shaquille may be shocked that I'm going to say this and everything, but there are a significant amount of Democrats that are actually against abortion. Some of them even come from the African-American churches and things of that nature. So yes, it may drive some people to come out to vote in for the Democratic candidate, but a lot's going to depend on what the candidate says about this particular issue. I'm not dismissing what Sasha brought up and what Shaquille kind of alluded to, because yes, there are some people that are going to look at other alternatives to abortion that may not be the healthiest and all of that. And yes, I am talking about like those coat hangers and other kinds of things that are out there and all of that. And even Shaquille, you were talking about the notion of the whole idea of after the fact kind of abortions, and the no use of birth control and things of that nature. I mean, there are some people within the debate that might even be upset over what used to be called the morning after pill and everything, which is, a pill that you can take after the fact, and definitely possibly even in some ways that to some people on the extreme might be killing the fetus and the baby as well. But there are definitely some of those conversations, because I think there are some of those pills that you can take days after the fact and everything, and it can still work and all of that. So those are some of the debates that are going to be out there, and I'll be interested to see.
It's not, Mark, where the main debate is. It's like Steve has sort of asked this question now. Is this something that's going to help, harm, or have no effect on the Democrats or Republicans coming into the midterms? Well, I think it's a bit like race relations. I think it's a bit like 1619 Project and CRT and transgenderism and all these other issues. I don't think that's actually the main thing that people are worried about. I think the main thing people are worried about in not just the United States, but all over the world is economics. How is my life, turning out? What future do my children have? Where do I think the country's going? Do I have opportunities? Can I afford to buy a house? Can I afford to feed myself and my family? Can I afford to put fuel in the car? These are the things that people are mostly worried about. I don't think it's something like how the Supreme Court is going to rule on an abortion, on a potential abortion case. I don't think that really is something that's going to swing an election. And also to that point, abortion laws, what you just said there, Mark, about, the morning after pill and all those types of things. Some of the abortion debate has really been about late trimester abortions. More Republican and conservative states are saying, look, if the fetal heartbeat, if there's a heartbeat, hey, it's too late. You shouldn't be able to have the abortion because the fetus would be viable outside the womb at that point. There are other people that are saying in more liberal states that if you are attempting an abortion and the fetus is partially born, you should be able to kill it while it's partially born. And that has obviously attracted the ire of conservatives. So, they've gone to the extreme side on that bit. I think the question that's really that really needs to be clarified for people is exactly where the line's going to be drawn. At what point is it no longer okay to abort the fetus? That's the question. And people can take their own moral stance on that. Right, but exactly. I think that to try to make out that your stance is the correct one, the most morally correct, and everybody else is wrong, and is therefore somehow this horrible pariah of society, is just a nonsense, whether that be conservatives or whether that be liberals that act like that.
Shaquille, it's nonsense, but unfortunately it's nonsense that exists all too often in my mind, and I've brought it up on some of my shows. I've definitely brought it up on some other shows as well, and I'm probably going to get myself in trouble even with maybe some of our founders and everything, because they have some religious beliefs of their own and everything. But sometimes I think that we as a society get too caught up in these moral absolutes and all of that. And, whether it's people that want to believe that it's their way or the highway, meaning that you have to believe in their system or not. And that's across the religious boundaries. It's not just Christians, it's Muslims, it's a number of others as well. And like I said, I don't have that answer. I'm not, couldn't step outside today and get hit by a truck and find the answer, but I'm hopefully not trying to find that.
This is precisely the reason why I react so strongly against things like these race-related stuff and transgender-related stuff and all of that. All right, people don't know. This is new stuff. There's no right or wrong answer. Let's pivot across to Ukraine, and this is all I'll say about this in relation to race. It's like comments that were made about, well, how about we help the black people in the Ukraine escape, as if somehow the white people in Ukraine don't matter. And I made that point to you. Hold
on a second. I'm coming back to the Ukraine and everything. The issue with the Ukraine.
Let me finish. Are we going to really suggest that those women in Poland who left those prams and strollers at the train station for mothers are somehow racist because they didn't specify that they were only for black mothers? I mean,
the issue with Ukraine and racism, and the issue with Ukraine and race is certain countries and certain places seem to have a very, and some people would even argue the United States, a very nationalistic policy toward who they want to accept in. That whole thing about give us your huddled masses and all of that, that becomes an issue when folks are fleeing Somalia and other places, and you are welcoming with open arms the people from Ukraine, but you're not welcoming with open arms the people from Somalia and Haiti, and that can be a race-related issue.
So I think the bottom line on this whole thing has to do with consistency, right? So
right, that's what I'm saying. Consistency.
I'm a Roman Catholic, so basically the Catholics believe in pro-life no matter what. No death penalty, no war, no killing, they're very, very, very consistent with that all the way. The reason chaplains exist in the military is not to tell individual Roman Catholic chaplains, is not to tell the soldier or sailor, airman, Marine to go out and kill somebody. It's to do confession when they come back, because most of them are so disturbed by the fact that they kill somebody that they literally do confession with them so they can reconcile their life and move on with what they
So
have.
guys,
So
before
that's
I
what
head
we're talking about.
before I head
Before we-
off the day,
I
real quickly,
don't think that the Catholics. I didn't think the Catholics had a pro-life at all costs viewpoint.
Well, I'm
I
gonna
mean, there are
give-
some Catholics that have liberation theology and other kinds of theologies. I mean, we can get a whole debate about
Yeah.
the Catholics and their different styles of political aspects, because there are some Catholic sides. And I went to a Jesuit university, that's why I know this, and I have some Catholic
Oh,
friends and everything. So there are definitely some that are more anti-war than others, and definitely some that were even more involved in like some of the civil rights struggles than others. That's how the whole concept, and y'all can look it up, of what liberation theology is all about. There's kind of this idea that yes, you need to have your religious morals and everything, but that it is justifiable to actually be involved in struggles for freedom. As a matter of fact, I imagine many of the liberation theologists would be on the side of the Ukrainian freedom fighters, and that's what I'm calling them, Ukrainian freedom fighters, and all along those lines. But other people, they might call them Ukrainian terrorists, but that would be the ones over there in Russia and everything. And there's a very few minorities that would use that phrase. I know Steve definitely wants to get to Ukraine. I know he's got to get out of here.
I've got
and
discussion,
everything.
guys.
But
Good
just really
discussion.
quickly, I was going to segue to another issue, but it's somewhat related, but I think it's very important and everything. But I was reading recently about, and it is a school here in North Carolina, but it is a international problem that exists and everything. And that's this issue of people that are using their position of power and everything in order to abuse that position of power. We saw it with the Catholic ministers and the different other people. We have now seen it with a School of the Art music teacher and all of that, because some of these people get these positions of power and they decide to use that position of power to get their sexual favors and all of that. And that was a major case that is out there and all of that. So that is something else that I know a lot of women are concerned about, because sometimes you are in a job or in a school education and you are put in a position of weakness, and sometimes folks take advantage of that and will abuse their power, as was the case of the violin teacher over there that is now being sentenced,
Right.
and rightfully so. But I don't know if anybody's got any thoughts on that, because like I said, it's not just a North Carolina issue, it's a global issue, as we saw from the Catholic ministers and some of the other ministers out there as well.
I'm just gonna chime in real quick before I let you guys handle that before I take off for the day. But Mark, real quickly, just a couple things to talk about. I want Sasha to talk, and when I'm back tomorrow, my last look will be on abortion. Maybe a last jab. I'm going to think about it. So Shaquille, please come on. But remember, Russia may annex the Donetsk and Luhansk regions.
I have no strong opinion on abortion one way or another, and I've never said on the show and never will where I stand on the issue.
I'm just being facetious, but real quickly, just a couple things there. Just want to give my quick updates. Russia is going to annex the Donetsk and Luhansk region. The Russian military equipment in eastern Ukraine is becoming very weak. That's what some analysts are saying. But Ukraine's used drones to destroy 2 Russian patrol vessels off the Black Sea. And what's interesting is that the European Union could impose an embargo on Russian oil this week. But what's really telling, and I had a talk with Andy Andrews yesterday, go Canes, by the way. They won their first playoff, and I was at the Canes game with them yesterday. And then also this primary day in Ohio and Indiana. But and we'll talk about those results tomorrow. But what's interesting is the ban from Wimbledon of Russian players. And I'm going to end, before I leave, I want to get Sasha Starr's perspective on this. So, and Sasha, I have this feeling in my heart you're going to agree with me. But Andy, a former player whom you met with when you went on a show, when I asked him about what he thought about Wimbledon's ban, he thought that it was the right thing to do and that Medvedev could move. That if you're living in Russia and your dictator is doing these kinds of things, you should, so he says Britain understands what Adolf Hitler was like. And they're basically saying, look, I know Medvedev's not involved in the Putin administration, but do you agree with that Wimbledon did the right thing by banning these Russian players?
There is a huge difference between, if you remember, 1936 Olympic Games in Germany. Nobody knew at the time what Hitler is going to do in the next few years. He was already Chancellor of Germany, but everything what he's done later on was not obvious in 1936. So all world, including the United States, participated in this Olympics and so on. Now, in Russia situation, everybody can see now what Putin is. Everybody understands that he is reincarnation of Hitler, and much worse than that, simply because he has a nuclear option, which Hitler never had. So it is a much worse situation. And the idea of Putin is to inflict as much damage to the West as possible in any way. If it's not military, then economically, then through immigration, because Putin actually engineered a few months ago that thousands of Syrian and other Middle Eastern refugees came through Belarus to the Polish border. He wanted to do that so Poland would. His thinking was that Poland probably will allow these refugees in, and then from Poland, because Poland is a territory of the European Union, they will go through all other countries like Germany, France, Italy, and just anything, whatever they can do. So as many refugees as possible, they would cross the border, and that was a plot of Putin with the help, of course, of his little assistance from Lukashenko from Belarus. Now, what's interestingly happened is that all of a sudden Poland resisted with all its might to have even one refugee on its territory. So where is the logic? So Poland is not allow even one single refugee from a Middle East, yet it allows millions, well over 3 million now, of Ukrainian in. Is Polish country, is it a racist country, would you say? Okay, let's think about that. Poland, several years ago, Poland, although it is member of the European Union, it is a member of NATO, yet through the immigration policies, their view is this, very simple one. Poland is for Poles. How about that? Is it something because it discriminates basically all the world? So even it doesn't matter you're Syrian or you're French or you're American or you're from Nigeria, you're not a Pole. Out. Poland is for Poles. What are we going to do about that? Is it a simple? This country has the right to close its border to any people that they don't want to see in their country? If not, then who needs borders? Why there are borders?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, I've got to thank you all so much. I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow morning. Hopefully, I'll be here for the whole hour. And things are crazy with work. We're getting to a new normal. Although I have one colleague who did get COVID, a member of our school board, and it's quite scary. He went on an inner city trip and a very healthy guy and got COVID. So this thing's still going around. He's coughing, got a high fever. But be safe wherever you are, guys. It's not over. It's still out there. So be careful, okay? All right. From my family to yours, Art, we wish you all the best, and I'll see you tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Steve. Actually, Steve brings up an interesting point. I'd love to hear people's thoughts about it and everything, because definitely there are variants out there and everything. So even though a lot of people seem to have this idea that it's over and that they can go back to work and go back to their jobs and go back to whatever this new normal is and everything, I was just wondering from a data standpoint, what are your thoughts, Chris? Because I do see a lot more people that are walking around without masks and walking around without whatever. But I was just reading an article yesterday where there's a new variant that's out there as well. They're supposed to be even more resistant to vaccines and all of that. And we do know that Kamala Harris just recently came down with COVID and everything. So some people are saying, hey, it's just going to be like the measles or the flu. No big deal and all of that. But others are concerned that it is still a threat to everybody's health. But as our and you have many other things that you do, including being lieutenant colonel, but you're definitely one of our people in that data analysis field. What are your thoughts? Are you thinking that we should all go back to regular work and just be good at that, or are we out? Are we not done with this whole thing?
Are you talking to Chris? Because he doesn't seem to be here.
Oh, I was talking to Chris, and well, he disappeared on me. How dare he?
No,
Well,
I'm not sure what's happened to him. He's disappeared a little while ago.
okay. Well, hopefully he'll come back. But what are y'all's two thoughts and everything? As to, because I do know that other parts of the world it is actually still going on and everything. I know y'all just opened up, I believe, in Australia, Shaquille, because you've had a chance to
Well,
travel and everything. So are you? But then I know that other parts of the world, like China, have gone into total shutdown. So what is
well,
your?
we're opening up. We've been. I think we've had more heavy restrictions than than most other countries, and certainly it's not been something that's been taken very well by Australians, and I think a lot of people are quite frustrated with the lockdowns and things that we've had in Australia. Look, ultimately, I think it's going to be something that we're going to have to live with, unless there's a major sort of resurgence of it or a variation of it that makes it, a lot more lethal or causing a lot more sort of widespread damage. I think it's something that we have to live with, and I would say that as long as vaccines are available to the people who want them, the people who want to take them can take them, and the people that don't, well, I think that's a decision for them to make. But I mean, we eventually we're going to have to learn to live with it, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. Chris, I was asking you and then you disappeared on me. But what's your take on that and everything in terms of COVID and the data? Because, like I said, there are new variants, and I guess people are just feeling that they're going to live with it, similar to measles and the flu and all of that. But what is your take as a data analyst? Do you feel that we are at that point where we can just say the pandemic is over and that we can go on to our new normal, whatever that new normal is?
Yeah. So I've been looking at not only the US data, but also data from Canada and data from Australia. And it's interesting that most researchers in Canada and Australia take a proportional view of how people are suffering from COVID. When we sit here in the United States, we talk about as if it's the Vietnam War, where Walter Cronkite puts up a scorecard and says, we have this many dead, we have this many wounded, we have this many that, and it's like a scorecard. And it's like, enough already. What is the proportion? What's the proportion of people dying in the United States from COVID? It's minuscule. I understand any death is a horrible situation. I get that. But the bottom line is that if you take a look at flu deaths, if you take a look at pneumonia deaths, if you take a look at all these other deaths by heart attack, all these other things, the proportionality of COVID is, even with the new variants, is down. So that, I mean, way, way, way down. So what we need to do is sit back and say, okay, what are we saying here? What are we saying that we need to, here's my deal. You treat it like the flu at this point. It's an endemic. It's not a pandemic. You treat it like the flu. You have now the nasal thing for COVID.
Right.
You got the nasal thing for flu. You got the vaccinations yearly made up with different variants, the ones that are preponderance in the society. And you move about your business. You go about your business. Look, I got a 2-year-old grandson. You don't think he snots and coughs and smits and whatever on me every single day? I mean, my wife and I are sick all the time and yes, we get COVID testing, and yes, it's negative. He's just going to bring home what he brings home, and we pick him up and we do our grandparently duty here. But the bottom line is we're going to get sick. So we just try to do what we can do to make sure that that's covered correctly. And we don't do stupid things. If I'm sick, if I'm coughing and sputtering, guess what? If I'm in a crowded area, I'll wear a mask. And people will ask me, why are you wearing a mask? Because I don't want to cough on you. If we would have done that in the flu and with everything else, we probably wouldn't be in the mess we're in now. But I mean, it's not that we're in a mess. But the bottom line is, and the whole thing is data. Data is not just data. Data, you got to go proportionality. And I like the way Canada does it. I like the way Australia does it. I don't like the way US does it. And that's just me.
I can buy that and everything, and definitely I can understand that. Hey, Sasha, any thoughts on that? And also, what are we hearing? And I know you're going to do your show in about 20 minutes or so, but what are we hearing from the Ukraine, and what is going on over there and all along those lines? Because definitely that is the news that everybody is paying attention to and all of that. So I'd love to hear what is happening. Of course, we do know that you'll have your show at exactly 11 o'clock. And who knows, maybe some of the guests will be coming in from the Ukraine and giving us an up-to-date report as well. But what are you hearing?
Well, situation is this. Really, both countries are biding their time for different reasons, though. Russians, they need definitely more manpower to do anything. They cannot move even an inch ahead. They've got city of Kherson several weeks ago, and that's about all what they've done so far. They hold some territories, but how long they're going to hold to those territories is quite unclear. Now, once Ukrainians will get all the ammunition they need and heavy weapons and so on, then it's just a matter of time that they will drive Russians completely out of their territory. And that would be a huge victory for Ukrainians and horrible disaster for Russia and for Putin personally. So far, he's going to operation on, I think, right after May 9th, and he appointed Mr. Patrushev, who is the head of FSB, to take his place while he will be operated. And to tell the truth, there is no negotiations right now because they're so far apart, and there is nothing to really to negotiate at all. And it may go on for several months, maybe if not years still. However, with each day, Ukraine is getting stronger and stronger because of the huge number. Like every day, they have 10 transport planes are flying from the United States to most likely Poland, although not necessarily, and they bring heavy equipment, heavy weapons, artillery. Apparently, it's became obvious that the number one weapon in this war is artillery. If you have a heavy artillery, you are the king. It's interesting concept because it's 21st century, and supposedly from Second World War, for example, the planes were really important part of the battle. But these days, heavy artillery is, because it can shoot at 50, 60 kilometers distance and inflict very, very serious damages. And the planes, you can hit those planes, but with a different kind of weapons, but not heavy artillery, shells. There is no defense against that. So this is very interesting how Ukraine will amass all these weapons and will prepare a counterattack. That's my opinion.
Yeah, they're also weather independent, right, Sasha? I mean, you can fire artillery. It could be raining, cloudy, foggy.
Absolutely.
I mean, you fire it, and it's really pretty good ranging material. They usually use optical, but they can also do it by radar. They can do it by a ton of different microwaves.
How about drones? All you need is
drones. Yep. Yeah, you're right. All they need is
fire.
Perfect. Yeah. Heck, that goes back to the balloons, right? I mean, the whole ballooning spotting. But yeah, drones, they fly 400, 500 feet. You don't need much weather there. And you just, that's really good. You're right. Yeah.
So these are the prospects for the war in Ukraine. And I remember, I've looked some of my shows, let's see, a month ago, for example. I just looked yesterday for one of my financial shows, and there was a Peter Bennett. And when I said my opinion about Ukraine or so on, he was almost horrified. And he said, "What are you talking about? Ukraine will be taken over in the next 2-3 days. Russia will just squash it." And I said, no, I don't think so. So now on the latest program last week, he agreed with me.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess he's never been to Eastern Europe. Yeah. Once you engage that again. Let me talk about minutia, right? And on the show yesterday, I was talking about that the U.S. is all about minutia. Yeah, they're all talking about, Oh, let's talk about abortion. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about that. You know what Ukrainians are worried about? If they're going to live through the night, if they're not going to get shelled, if they're going to get taken by bus into Russia. That's what they're worried about. Let me tell you something. If the U.S. would get off this minutia horse poop and understand that, look, if we're invaded, there's going to be an issue here as to, hey, I don't care if you're gay. I don't care if you're trans. I don't care whatever. Can you carry a weapon? Good. Here you go. Can you fire off this artillery piece? You're right. Good. You're back there. I don't care if you're black, yellow, or purple. If you can help us defeat the invaders, the occupation areas, and I will bet you, Sasha, I'll bet you any money that Ukraine was into that minutia before they got invaded. There were little things, little issues that they were trying to, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, we're one Ukraine. Right wing, the Azov battalion. I mean, I'm sure that people are going, oh my God, we don't want the right wingers. And all of a sudden they're like, yeah, we'll fight beside you, because all of a sudden it's one problem, and
that's the thing. That's the thing with the mass hysteria in the United States. And as I was saying before, you got 20-something-year-olds that are on the steps of the Supreme Court crying at the moment, like it's so terrible that life might be brought into the world that they don't that they want to abort. There is some 20-year-old who's been quoted as saying, "This is why the Democrats have to win, and they must pack the Supreme Court," as if that will solve things. As if somehow, when the Republicans get back into power, they wouldn't also pack the Supreme Court to counter the packing of the Democrats. There's no forethought to this.
What you're saying,
and it's
I do have a question.
Such a major step back, right? Such a major step back for women in the United States that abortion rules in the US are going to be brought more in line. The Mississippi Act, by the way, the Mississippi case, all that would do is bring the US or the rules in Mississippi in line with what most of the countries, like 39 out of 40 countries in Europe, have as their abortion rules. So according to the left of the United States, countries like Denmark and Sweden and Norway are really abusive towards their women. I mean, it's so silly. Like, it's just, people don't know what they're talking about in America, and then they get all hysterical, and nothing matters. And as you just said with the Ukraine, look, I think it's good for people to be worried about minutiae rather than whether or not they're going to be shelled in the middle of the night. But you're right, you need to have something in common. Now, I haven't been to the Ukraine, but I know a lot of Ukrainians. And the one thing that I will say is I don't ever hear many of them say, "Oh, I wish I could burn my flag." I don't see Ukrainian kids showing disrespect to their country or the country of their parents. And that's what you do see in Australia. That's certainly what you see in the United States.
Hey, Shaquille, I've got a question for you, and it's based on something that I heard, and you alluded to it a couple of times, and I just want to know your take on this. I had the pleasure of being on a show on Sunday. It's not one of our shows and everything, but I was the young lady was talking about housing and some of the things that are going on in housing, and then of course the discussion went in all kinds of different directions. And actually, I think what we were talking about was student loans. Now that I think about it, we were talking about student loans and all of that. But within the conversation about student loans, we got to learning about certain fields that exist in there and everything. And it was found that there is only, in the U.S., African Americans make up 12% of the population. And Chris, you've actually talked about this in terms of some of your own medical stuff and things along those lines. Now, in terms of medicine, there are only 3% of the doctors. 3% of the doctors in the United States are of African American descent. That is nowhere near the population and everything. So there are efforts to level, quote unquote, the playing field. So I just wondered your take on that, if there is a significant amount of folks that are not going into a field, and a lucrative field at that, and some cases they might even be pushed out of it. I think that one of the cases that I saw was actually a gentleman that was suing the medical establishment that he worked at because he felt that he was being discriminated at while he was at that particular hospital. And definitely there's only, I think, three hospitals connected to African American or HBCUs that deal with medicine, Meharry being one of them. I think Howard may be another, but I was just wondering your take on whether or not that should be a concern or not from those that are of African American descent.
I love how you prefaced it with one thing and then asked a completely different question. Well, that's a simple answer. Should it be something that African Americans and actually the wider community should be concerned about, that there is this grave disproportion of African Americans in the medical community? Yes, they should be concerned. Have I ever said anything other than that?
No, you don't. But I
Right,
mean,
that's right. So I never say anything other than that. What I say is, let's not bullshit each other and say, well, you know what I think it might be? Racist. It must be a racist policy. We're not going to look at it any further than that because we know that America is inherently this racist, horrible country. So therefore, how we're going to fix the problem is we're going to tell universities that you must have a certain percentage of your schools made up of African American students. That will somehow fix the problem, right? Because all that does is completely ignore some of the absolute rubbish that's occurred in the United States that everybody should be aware of. Let me finish, that people should be maddened by. The United States, the percentage of the GDP that is expended on healthcare in the United States is about double what most other nations spend. It's about double, for example, what Australia spends. But back a few decades ago, the great AMA, the American Medical Association, lobbied government, and they paid universities. Hundreds of millions of dollars was spent to make sure that universities would have less positions available, less spots available for kids to go into the medical field. Now, of course, that's going to have a flow-on effect into less well-funded universities like HSBUs. So if you want to solve the issue, how about dealing with big government and government that allows themselves to be lobbied by groups like the AMA, who are majorly funded by the pharmaceuticals, by the way, who have created this kind of abusive system so that America has half the doctors per population, per capita, as most of the rest of the world, and double the cost than most of the rest of the world.
Let me give you a flip side of that, and then I want to hear from Chris.
Rather than just saying, let's look at this little statistical discrepancy and then suggest that it's all because of racism, and how we're going to fix it is to be anti-racist.
Well, let me give you a flip side of that. And like I said, if Steve was here, he might be upset that I'm going to use this example and everything, but I'm just going to throw it out there and everything. And I'd love to hear Chris's thought about this, because if you look at some of the medical schools, if you look at some of the bioengineering schools and some of the things that are in those kind of fields, we do this habit of recruiting people from other countries to come in here while not necessarily looking at the ones that are already here in the United States, be they white, black, or purple for that matter and everything. So then I wonder, do we need to maybe curtail some of those policies? Because I can guarantee you that if I was to go to the Duke Medical School, I'd probably find quite a few students from India, Pakistan, and other countries, whereas I might have a hard time finding a African-American student and all of that. So
what is your take on it? But you know why, Mark? Because it's once again, it's the same thing. Right, when you have these quotas, you've got the top Ivy League universities in America and some of the top private schools like Stanford, USC, those sorts. And I've got nothing against them. Stanford and USC are both some of my favorite universities in America. But at the end of the day, if you've got a race quota, what they're going to do is they're going to cherry pick the very, very top out of that particular race. Okay, they're not doing anything to help that community. They're just cherry picking the very, very top. So when you actually go around the world, what do? You cherry pick the very, very top performers out of those poorer countries and bring them in. So of course, you know what? In a population of 1.5 billion, whatever there is in India, the top 500 kids that graduate in high school in India are probably going to be better than the average black, white, purple, whatever colored kid in America. The average.
Shaquille, I agree with you. So I spent many years, I shouldn't say many years in academia. University of Pittsburgh, Wilkes University, Carnegie Mellon University. And what I found is that it behooves the school to bring in the best qualified, because then what they can do is they use that for their public relations. They say, hey, look, we have this amount of minorities, which they're not minorities, okay, but they put them down as minorities. And we have, this amount of SAT scores and this amount of whatever and this amount of and also the people that have smart kids. I'm not saying this, Mark or Shaquille. I'm not saying it is generally speaking. I'm just kind of putting it out there. Is that chances are that they have money. If they got money, they're gonna contribute to the school, Duke included. So what happens is you can sit back, and as a matter of fact, there's been a study done that the middle class of the United States is getting to the point where they can't get into schools because you got the very rich that are coming in, and then you got the very socioeconomically challenged that have they have a scoring in the school, and that scoring, if your family makes less than $20,000 a year, and if you are a minority, if you are African American or Asian Pacific or whatever else, that scoring puts you above the middle class white student. So therefore, they can't get into schools. They can't get into the Ivy League schools. So it's that type of area that I'm saying. I constantly say it. Consistency. There's got to be.
And the most privileged,
you know?
the most privileged that you could possibly dream of being would be somebody like myself in the United States, or a child of mine. If you are a minority and you're wealthy and you're in the United States, you hit all the quotas, you can afford to do whatever you want, you can afford to pay the fees, you're gold. You know, Mark, if you win the Powerball one last time I was in America, it was $1.5 billion. Trust me, if you win the $1.5 billion and you go on to have children and your kids want to go to any university in America, you're set. You're a minority and you're rich, right? That is the most privileged place you could be, because you get the best of everything in life. You get to act like you're a victim, and you get everyone to pander to you, and you're not a victim. You can do whatever you want.
And this is why I really like Ukraine at this point in time, is that Ukraine could have very easily, the rich in that country could have said, you know, I'm out of here. I'm going to go to wherever I want to go to. I'm going to wait till till things quiet down, then I'll come back. Maybe not. I don't care. You know, I'll go to the Riviera or whatever. Zelensky could have very easily said, I'm out of here. You know, I'm going to take the next train to wherever I want, France or wherever I want to go. I'm just going to sit there until the war is over, and then I'll come back. He didn't do that. And this is something that I'm hoping the United States takes a measure of, they take a measure of loyalty from, is that I don't know if this is, I'm sure the media would make a big deal out of this if it would happen, but I didn't see the rich kind of saying, I'm out of here for Ukraine. I mean, they stuck it out. I mean, they stuck out the bombing raids. They stuck out everything. In the meantime, the oligarchs over in Russia, they're beating feet, man. They're out of there. They're trying to get to wherever they can get to outside of Russia or outside of the war zone. So I take a look at that, and I think that needs also to understand we haven't had a crisis here in the United States. Gas price inflation is not a crisis. Inflation is not a crisis. This is not a crisis. A crisis is when somebody's at your door with a gun to your head saying, "Give me your house, or I'm going to blow your brains out." That is a crisis.
Well, Chris, firstly, I don't think anything less than war should be described as less than a crisis. I think inflation and economic conditions are probably, problems that are reasonable for Americans to have fears about. But what I will say is, if you are going to put that as your definition of a crisis, is somebody knocking on your door and say, "Give me your house, or I'm going to blow your brains out," then I think that with the exorbitant levels of tax that the Democrats want to put on people at 90%, so on and so forth, the IRS's rules, if you break them, you have people with guns to come around to your house and demand your property, they're going to blow your head off. So I would say that anybody who has any feeling that their property should belong to them and they should be able to keep it should consider the IRS to be a threat to them.
Sounds good, but Shaquille, we're at the top of the hour, and actually we got to get ready to get over, and I've actually got to go help him and everything. Sasha's show and everything, so I'm going to hit this lovely people running in and out, but I've thoroughly enjoyed this lively discussion, as always, with Shaquille and Chris and everybody else here. Thoroughly enjoyed it, guys. And we'll be back on tomorrow and all of that. So this has been fun, and we'll catch you on Wednesday.